Hello, everyone. These are going to be your Day 2 notes on dimensional analysis. Remember that we have now equations with lots and lots of variables in them, and I'm going to tell you which variable to solve for. When you are doing that, you are trying to isolate that variable. So take a look at number 1. I want to solve for D. Notice there's 2 of them, so I'm going to get them together. I'm going to minus this D over, and I get 5c is equal to 2d minus 1. Now if I want to isolate the d, I have to get rid of the 1. Please remember that this 1 and the 5c cannot go together. One has a variable, one is a constant. Now if I'd like to isolate that d, I'm going to divide by 2. Please notice that 5 and 1 do not divide by 2. So you can leave your answer as 5c plus 1 all over 2. Or you could split that into 2 little fractions, meaning I could have 5c over 2 plus 1 over 2 is equal to d. Either one of those answers would be acceptable. If I'm looking at number 2, I'm going to isolate the q this time. They are on opposite sides of each other. So I need to get them together. Now I want you to notice that the one on the left is a 6q, the one on the right is a qr. So even though I'm going to move them together, they're not actually going to combine because one has an r and one doesn't. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract the qr over. Now I have 6q minus qr minus 18 is equal to t. Okay, now remember, I'm trying to isolate the q, so I'm going to move the 18 over since that does not have a q. And this is where things are going to start to get interesting, because both of these things have a q. So in order for me to isolate that, I'm going to need to be a little bit creative. So since they both have a q, I'm going to sort of do the distributive property in reverse. So since they both have a q, I can pull a q out. And when I do that, basically I'm dividing both of those terms by q. If I take the q out, I have a 6 minus r left in there. Now, the reason I called this the distributive property backwards is because if I were to redistribute the q, I should get the line above it. Okay, so we're pulling that q out. Now, if I want to isolate the q, I have to get rid of the 6 minus r. It's being multiplied, so I'm going to divide by it, and I get q equals t plus 18 all over 6 minus r. You cannot split this thing into little fractions. You cannot tell me that q is equal to that. You're making up your math. You cannot split it that way. So please do not try. All right, let's try another one like that. Here I'm trying to isolate my x's, so I'm going to get them together. I'm going to go ahead and add this x over. Please notice I won't actually be able to combine the 7x and the xy. They're not like terms. Now I'm going to move the 2z over because it does not have an x. And I get 7x plus xy is equal to 4 plus 2z. Now here's where I'm going to do that distributive property backwards again. Both of the terms on the left have an x, so I'm going to pull the x out. And when I do that, I have 7 plus y left. Now that 7 plus y is being multiplied by the x, so I'm going to divide by it. And I get x is equal to 4 plus 2z all over 7 plus y. Okay, this time I have w's that I'm trying to isolate. They're here and here. You will notice that when I do move these together, I actually will be able to combine them because they both are just w's. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to move the smaller one over because that's what I'm used to doing. I get negative y is equal to 5w minus 2. Now I need to get rid of that 2, so I'm going to add it. I want you to realize here, I can make this negative y plus 2 on this side, or I can make it 2 minus y, and it means the same thing. Now to isolate that w, I'll divide by 5. and I get w equals 2 minus y all over 5, or you could split that to look like this. So either one big fraction or two little fractions. Okay, moving on to number 5. This time I'm trying to isolate m's. Please notice when I try and get those m's together, they will not actually combine together. I'm going to move the km over. It will not combine with the 3m because of the k. Now I'm going to move the n over because it does not have an m. Basically, I'm trying to collect all of the terms with the m's in it on one side and all of the terms without m's in it on the other side. Now I'm going to do that distributive property backwards. This is called factoring, folks. I'm going to take out an m from both of those terms. And when I do that, I have 3 minus k left. Now I'm going to go ahead and divide by the 3 minus k. And we have that. Now, folks, I want you to realize this could be written in a couple different orders. Up top, I could have this. On the bottom, I could have that. Okay, they mean the same thing as long as you have the correct symbols with the correct terms. So this would be another possible answer. Number 6, this time I want to isolate for that little a up top. So I have quite a bit of work to do here. First thing I'm going to do is get rid of that 2. So I have 2a is equal to h times a plus b. Now remember, please don't distribute by that h. I want to get rid of the h, so I'm going to divide by it. It's being multiplied. Okay, now if I want to isolate that little a, I'm going to subtract the b. Remember, when you do this, the whole fraction is getting subtracted by the b, not just the denominator. So that would be your final answer. All right, let's do 2 more here and then we'll move to that handout. Here's my n. Notice when I get these together, they will combine because they are like terms. I get q is equal to RT plus 10n. Now I'm going to move the RT over. So q minus RT is equal to 10n. And then finally, we'll divide by that 10. I'm going to go ahead and leave this as one big fraction. Of course, you could split that into 2 little fractions. This time, I'm going to solve for a. Now, you'll notice my a's will not be combining because they are not like terms. Okay. I'm going to move the z over because that does not have one of those a's in it. And then I'm going to do that distributive property backwards and take out the a. Divide by the x minus w. Oops, that's not a y, that's a w. And I get a is equal to negative y minus z all over x minus w. Again, I remind you, that could be in a different order as long as the correct symbol is on the correct term. All right, let's move over to your handout here. And I think I just have a couple. Yeah, I just have 3 problems here for you. So, number 1, the equation shown is used to find the force of gravity F between 2 objects, where G is the gravitational constant, M1 and M2 are the masses of the 2 objects, and R is the distance between the 2 objects. And here is your formula. Which equation correctly shows the distance between the 2 objects? Well, what is the distance between the 2 objects? That is R. So this problem is telling me I have to isolate the r. And if you look at all of those answers, you see that the r is isolated. So if I'm going to do that, first thing I got to do is I got to get the r out of the denominator. It's being divided, so I'm going to multiply. So now I have f r squared is equal to g m1 m2. Now I need to get rid of the f, so I'll divide by the f. And I have r squared is equal to g m1 m2 all over f. Finally, I have to get the squared off of that r. So I need to think to myself, what is the inverse of squaring something? What's the opposite of squaring something? Well, the opposite of squaring something is to square root it. So if I square root both sides, it's going to cancel out the squared, and I'll have r is equal to the square root of g m1 m2 all over f. Now please notice that square root is over the entire thing. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do the other. So the entire side of that is under the square root. And if you look at your answer choices, your answer should be letter D down here. Okay. Why don't you go ahead and try number 2 here and see what you come up with. So go ahead and pause this and see how you do here on number 2. You're looking at this formula, E equals mc squared. M is the mass, c is the speed of light. It says which equation finds m? That means I want to isolate the m. And in order to isolate the m, I have to divide by the c squared. So I have m is equal to E over c squared. The correct answer that I hope you chose is letter D. All right, finally, let's do a little bit of geometry. A rectangular octagon shown. So there's your octagon. There are 8 congruent triangles. Remember that if it's a regular octagon, that means all of the sides are congruent. So all of these sides are congruent. And what this problem is telling you is that the triangles that are formed in there are also congruent. Each triangle has an area of 21.7 square centimeters, and the perimeter is 48 centimeters. What is the length of each side of the octagon? Well, if I'm talking sides, that's talking perimeter. So if I know that the perimeter is 48, I can take that 48 and divide it by 8, and now I know that each side is 6 centimeters. So each of these guys are 6 centimeters all the way around. Okay. Now it says solve the area of a triangle formula for h. Well, area of a triangle is that. If I want to solve for h, I got to get rid of the half, so I'm going to divide by a half. Now, folks, dividing by a half is the same as multiplying by 2. So when I simplify this, it's going to be 2a is equal to bh. Please ask me about that tomorrow if you don't understand what I just did there. We're going to divide. I'm supposed to be solving for h, so I'm going to divide by b, and I get h is equal to 2a over b. Okay. Now it says, what is the height of each triangle? Well, height is what I solved for. So now I have to go through and plug in what I know. The 2 does not change. I know the area from the original problem is 21.7. And the base is just the sides of those triangles. And I found out that the sides were 6. So I'm going to grab my calculator, and I'm going to find the numerator first. 2 times 21.7, I get 43.4. Then I'm going to divide it by 6, and this says to round to the nearest tenth. So if I round this to the nearest tenth, I get 7.2, and that would be centimeters. Okay, folks, so you can go ahead and complete your notes check for today. This will be the last video that you are going to see for Chapter 2. The next lessons that we do, we'll do them traditionally, meaning I will be in front of you during class, and then you'll have your homework to do at home.